Donald Trump hinted at it. Justin Trudeau said it in words of one syllables. The Iranians did it.
Yeah, and the Iranians, so far, at least from what we're hearing, the information that we're getting, at least are not completely denying it, but they are questioning whether it is indeed the case. We were able to, Richard, today reach the head of the Iranian Civil Aviation Authority, and he told us that he does not flat out deny that this might have happened, but he does question whether it did. In his mind, he says this plane took off, was in the air for several minutes. I think it was 5 minutes in total. He says that according to Iranian figures, the plane tried to make a move back to the airport after what they believe was some sort of problem and then crashed. Now, he says if it would have been hit by a missile, according to his assessment, it would have plunged to the ground immediately. So he's basically said, well, if that was the case, why didn't it plunge immediately? Of course, as you've noted, we don't have the data yet. We don't know if, in fact, that did happen. But that's what we're hearing from the Iranians right now, Richard.
All right, let's go to Paula. A very somber Prime Minister, understandably making this announcement. And really, all he could say is he wants a full, credible and independent investigation.
Yeah, and in order to get that, Richard, I think he decided it was necessary to come out and do this dramatic press conference. Look, it gives so much more weight to this investigation, Richard, when you have the Prime Minister of a country that lost not just 63 Canadians, but as the Prime Minister pointed out yesterday, 138 people that were coming back to Canada, had roots in Canada, had careers, jobs in Canada, and that is the issue. And he made a very fine point of something, Richard, and that is the ties that bind, right? The vast majority of these people are Canadian and Iranians, that there are many Iranians on this airplane. And that's why he is calling on Iran, a country that Canada doesn't even have diplomatic relations with, to be more open about the investigation. Another thing, Richard, something you know so well, think about MH17 and really the debacle that was that investigation when it came to relations with Russia. And that's why it was important that he called Prime Minister Mark Rutte from the Netherlands to ask for advice. Canada has been on the front foot of this. They want a transparent investigation. They want it for the family members. They want closure, as the Prime Minister said. And this is Canada putting all the pressure that it can bear to try and get that investigation.
Fred, in Tehran, look, it won't be easy for them to admit it, but they can just admit it. I mean, the Iranians can admit it. Is it likely that if they were responsible, they would ever admit it? Or will they obfuscate and deny, even in the face of the obvious?
I think that there is a possibility that the Iranians, if indeed this was a missile strike that took down this plane, as the Prime Minister of Canada said, possibly an accidental missile strike that took down the plane, I think that there might be a chance that the Iranians would admit it. And I want to tell you why. It's because the shooting down of a civilian jetliner here in this country is a major issue. Anybody who knows the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran knows that one of the key events for this country was the shooting down of a civilian Iranian airliner by an American warship in the Persian Gulf in 1988. Since then, everywhere you go here in this city, any sort of memorials, they always remind you that they feel that Iran was treated very unfairly in that event. They believe that the Americans took for a long time to actually admit that they did it, never really apologized for it. So for the Iranians, this kind of event certainly strikes extremely close to home. And that's something that politicians here, of course, have to keep in mind as well, that the Iranians do have that history. So I think looking at Iran's history, there is a possibility of that. Of course, this is a very closed-off society, very closed-off state, especially if you look at the military services. But I think looking at Iran's history, that's certainly something that's going to play into decision-making of the top brass here, Richard.